Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and we are here today for another one of our conversations at home. As a continued reminder, we are raising funds through our COVID-19 fund for SAG-AFTRA members who are affected by all the closed productions, so please check out the link below this video and consider donating if you're able to support in any way. We are continuing our series of conversations with Little Fires Everywhere, today with Gavin Lewis, who's so fantastic in the show as Moody, and thank you so much for joining us. And wanted to just start by asking how you've been, how your day-to-day has been, and how you and your family are doing through all of this quarantining and staying at home so far.
I've been great. Luckily, we've been pretty safe. My family's all good. We're all just hanging out in the apartment, trying to stay busy where we can. I've been doing a lot of reading and guitar playing, which I didn't have much of a chance to do while we were filming. And like you mentioned a minute ago, I've been playing games with Jordan, who plays Trip on the show.
Yeah, amazing. I wanted to start with asking you a little bit about your upbringing in entertainment, because you've been working in the industry for a number of years, and I know that your parents worked in theater, so you were very much surrounded by a lot of artistry and creativeness when you were growing up. And once you stepped into the business yourself, what were some of the elements of acting and the craft that you suddenly realized that you'd subconsciously been picking up just from being around it so much?
I think a big part of it is I watched actors for so long. It was super helpful in almost like a natural kind of read. It helped with like ear training as far as reading, being able to read a script and pick up on the way the language should flow. Just kind of subconsciously watching actors for so many years. And it's funny, I wish I had paid more attention when I was younger, because when I was little, I wanted nothing to do with acting. I was, I think, maybe overexposed to theater. And then I kind of jumped on the train when I was about 9. But it is crazy when you're growing up around it for so long. I feel like there has been quite a lot I've picked up on subconsciously.
Yeah. I also love that as an actor, you've talked about how you actually really enjoy the process of auditioning and walking into the room, which, is the case for some people, but not for everybody. And so I was interested in what aspects of it you really enjoy in that moment and how you really take advantage of the opportunity to step into a room in front of casting directors and perform for them.
Yeah, I mean, every audition is kind of a mini performance. It's like, because I do like theater now, after that period of time. I do like theater, and every time it's like my own little showcase. So I get to really spend time figuring out as much as I can about the character. It's not always a ton, thanks to audition sides sometimes being very short. But I just like going in and doing the very best I can for every audition, because I really enjoy trying to do each character as differently as I can from the last one. So every time it's fun.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of detail and a lot of background on Moody when you were auditioning for this show? And what were the things that you really enjoyed about preparing that character for your audition?
Yeah, I had more than usual because there was a book for this one. So I did, I think, the very first audition just off of the audition sides, and then immediately after I read the book, and I read the book during the auditioning process, and it was a very fast audition process from the very first audition to booking. I think it was about a week. So I did the first audition, and then I read the book as fast as I could to get as much information about the character as I possibly could. And then I went in and had 2 more auditions, and then got the role. But it was incredibly helpful because reading the book really gave me big broad strokes for the character, like his relationship with his family and sort of the way the character interacts with people at school, like big helpful points that I could draw on.
Yeah, I also love that you and Jordan Elsa, who plays your brother in the show, actually met before you stepped into the audition room together to do a chemistry read. And I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit about that and the way in which that was a really unique experience and really useful for both of you.
Mhm. No, it was great. And I give all credit to David Rubin for being such an incredible casting director to get these super nice people. Like, it's really cool when you're going into an audition and you get to meet everyone first and know that everybody there is cool. It's not like there's not an air of competitiveness. It's just everyone's there to do the best they can. And I met Jordan right before the chemistry read, and we went out in the hall to read through the lines, and unintentionally we were reading right next to a second door to go into the audition room, and they stepped out and were like, be quiet. And we were, oh boy. But it was a good first read through with Jordan. It was in that read that I think we were both like, hey, I think this is who I hope gets the part, because I'd like to do it with them.
Yeah.
I got super lucky.
Yeah, and then once the two of you were both cast, I imagine that the two of you worked very closely together in determining that relationship between the two brothers. There's such a great dynamic in the way that you play them because they're very different people, but obviously there's still a closeness at the same time, as well as a competitiveness, obviously, over Pearl. So how did the two of you kind of come together and navigate and figure out the way that you wanted to perform those two characters side by side with each other?
I think it was just a lot of conversations on this set. More than I think anything I've ever done, there was just a lot of talking through characters and relationships. So it was just over time through numerous conversations about interactions and like what the two brothers have in common and what the jealousies are between the two. And it's funny because we do really get along very well in real life. So then it was just kind of trying to suppress that on screen and trying to figure out where the common ground was with the brothers.
Yeah, and you know, your character as well is a little bit more of an internal character compared to some of his siblings. He's a little quieter, a little more in the background, but we get such a sense of everything that he's going through on this emotional journey as well. So is there a difference for you in preparing for a role like that versus something that's very dialogue heavy in your process?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more just doing the written work, just everything, his whole backstory, all the information that never really shows on screen, just so I have a really strong point to come from as far as internal monologue that tends to change depending on the different directions they take the scene, as far as there are often line changes on set. And so it's just really having a solid base of where the character is coming from, and I try and do all of my written homework first. And I did a bunch of research into the 90s. Being born in 2003, I knew nothing about the 90s. I realized this as soon as we started, and so I did a ton of research. I watched TV shows, I looked into the culture, I listened to music. So for me, it's really just having a really strong base of thoughts I can draw on from the character.
Yeah, and I believe as well that this was your first time doing a period piece as well, where you had to do that specific research. So how did you navigate setting about that for the first time?
It was sort of just taking in as much book information as I could. A big part of it was Moody specific, some of his specific items. Like he had, I don't know if it ever actually shows in the show, but there was a really cool set piece that was a Kurt Cobain conspiracy board. That I did a bunch of research into those conspiracies, and of course, Before Sunrise, that Moody talks about quite a lot. I made sure to watch and do my homework on. So that was a big part of my research. And then on top of that, it was just like the biggest points of the 90s I could find, like music and culture and whatever I could find.
Yeah, and even from like you mentioning him loving Before Sunrise and talking about that movie a lot, you know, it's a character who's very interested in culture and art and the world outside of the community that he's growing up in. So kind of how did that help you discover who he was as a person, and did you do a lot of research into the other types of things that you think he would have been really interested in?
Yeah, and it's cool because I especially like the guitar playing was nice because I play guitar, and I think the more artistic side, I think came a little more naturally to me because I think I am a little bit like that in real life. At least I like to think I am. So I think that side of Moody came a little bit easier to me because I can relate to that stronger.
Yeah. I also feel like you've mentioned that you kind of enjoyed the journey of playing this unrequited love and this quiet heartbreak that he's going through in the show at the moment with the episodes that we're seeing. So what were the aspects of that you particularly enjoyed, and how did you think about the way that you wanted to play that on screen?
That is always, I mean, it's so much more fun. It's just different. It's fun to play a character that doesn't get what he wants. Like it's so fun to connect to that choice of like desperately wanting something so bad and not quite getting it. Is really, really interesting to play. And the way I kind of tried to portray that is Moody is a more internal guy. So I tried to do as best I could, sort of imitating incredible Reese Witherspoon, how the thoughts really play so strongly in her eyes. Carrie does it incredibly as well, of course. So I just tried my very best to have a strong enough internal monologue that everything that Moody was feeling, you could still see.
Yeah. And then how is your relationship working with Lexi Underwood, who plays Pearl, and developing that rapport between the two of them on screen?
Excellent. I had actually the very first scene I ever did was with Lexi, and it was actually a scene that didn't end up in the show. It was part of the big flashback sequence that we have in the early episodes of us kind of getting to know each other. And so it was we connected pretty quick because I think we do have a similar personality outside of the show. And working with her so much, you sort of just get to know the people you're working with the most anyway. And then we got along really well on top of that.
Yeah, it also sounds like you and a lot of the other cast playing your siblings and Lexi as well had a great experience in the unique opportunity to go to Disney. Was it Disneyland that you guys went to together? And I think that's so brilliant because it gave you such a natural way to build your chemistry with each other, before you stepped foot on set together. So what were the ways in which that created a really natural rhythm once you came to filming?
Yeah, it was amazing. I want to do that for everything I hopefully get to work on, because it's just great getting to know the people outside of work. Um, because I think there can be a stronger connection there outside of doing really heavy scenes. It's just building that relationship outside makes set so much more comfortable when you're doing some of these really heavy scenes. It just makes, I think, everyone more comfortable and makes the scenes flow better.
Yeah, and even in that same realm, I know that you and the rest of the actors in your family did a lot of dinners on set
Mhm.
beforehand to have a lot of conversations about like the society that they were living in, the community, and what were some of the really useful things for you that you discovered and learned about your character or the world that he was existing in from those dinners and those conversations with the rest of the cast?
Yeah, I think it was really cool because, like you said, Reese and Josh, we had a day that we sat down at the actual dinner table on set, and we had a big, long, I think it was 2 or 3 hour conversation just about everything at the time. And it was so helpful because we were talking to somebody that was there then. I mean, I was not alive. So it was incredibly helpful getting a perspective of somebody that was there. And on top of that, two actors that have already done so much research into their characters that they could help us with, specific details about the culture of the time and the way our family sort of views the world was massively helpful.
Yeah, and I know that you met Liz Tickler even early on in the audition process as well. What were some of the things that she was really helpful with in terms of you figuring out Moody and kind of the environment that she created on set for you all when you were filming?
Well, she did so much for us in just the adaptation to the screen. I mean, some of the small details of the character that she pulled from the book, whole backstories that she would pull from like sentences, which was incredible. She really filled out, I think, some of the characters. And on top of that, I mean, the first time I met her was in the audition room, and she just made me feel so comfortable. Like, she's such a nice person that going into the audition room, I was more at ease than I think I have been for some other projects, because she really just kind of radiates warmth. She's that kind of person. And I think that carried on to set, where everyone really was just there having a good time, thanks to Liz.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you about Reese Witherspoon and Carrie Washington, because as well as being the two leads in the show, they're also producers on it. And I was curious if that kind of gives you a unique dynamic on set, or kind of like what that lends itself to the rest of the cast through them also having that producer position.
Yeah, I mean, I think Reese, especially, I got to work with Reese more than Carrie. She sort of just set herself up for me, at least, as this excellent sort of role model of like, this is how I would love to be if I ever manage to get to any point in my career that I can be like this. Like, such an excellent example of the energy she brought to set and how well she's doing at producing, and like the multifacets of her career is very impressive. And she was always just such like a warmth on set. Like, she would come in with loads of energy at 6 a.m. And make everyone laugh, and then be so incredible in her scenes. There's especially, I have a scene one-on-one with her in 8 that I'm excited for everybody to see, that was just so much fun, because she is such a talented actress and she does so much homework for her character that I swear she knew more about my character than I did. And it's just so much fun to play off of somebody like that, because the reads change and it's a dynamic scene, and it makes my job so much fun.
Yeah, I also just wanted to ask you a little bit in general about, the overall craft and process for you as an actor on something like Little Fires Everywhere versus your previous role that you just did on The Prince of Peoria, which is multicam comedy instead. And they're very, very different. And what were the different ways that those two projects challenged you alongside each other?
I think Prince was more challenging in the actual lines, because there was such especially for me, it was really the first time I'd ever played a lead like that. And so it was such just a bulk of lines for me to learn that I ended up spending a little more time on the lines on that project, that sort of shifted into character study on this project. But it was, I think, a really good learning experience for me to, like, especially because they would change the lines in the middle of takes. And it was funny, it became a running joke of how much they could change the lines before they'd throw me off. it was like, we're gonna try this. We came up with this whole new, try this big monologue that we just came up with. And it was so much fun to try and take those brand new lines and fit them into the timing of the scene, which I think was like exponentially helpful for this project, where there was a lot of just improvising in the scenes. They would have us play, like once we'd gotten a few good takes down, they would have us just play around. And I think learning to think on my feet like that from Prince was exceptionally helpful for this project.
Yeah. Also, one of the things that I think is really wonderful that you've done throughout your career is you've been very vocal about being type 1 diabetic, and you've been a great spokesperson for that. And I just wanted to have you talk a little bit about that and why it's been so important for you to use your platform in that way throughout your career.
Yeah. So I am a spokesperson for Beyond Type 1, and I sort of gravitated towards them because they focus more on living well with diabetes than focusing on finding a cure for diabetes, which of course I want. But I just think it's important, since we have no idea of when the cure is going to be, that we focus on how to just be happy with what we've got. And I am thrilled to be a spokesperson for them, because I feel like if there's any way I can use this platform that I'm gradually getting to help people in a similar situation I was in, that's a dream come true.
Yeah, and I heard that kind of you really relished the fact that you had the 90s costume, because it's kind of looser clothing, and that was actually a great thing for you to be able to keep your device hidden a little bit more easily.
Yeah, it was perfect. And it was funny because, of course, what I have now wouldn't have existed in the 90s. So it was perfect to have these big baggy wardrobes that were so comfortable. They were my favorite thing ever to wear, that I could disguise everything. And costuming was amazing. Like I had sort of an elastic belt that I would put on that I would slide my stuff into that was mine. And I forgot to bring it to set a couple days, and costuming was amazing. They immediately got me something else I could use to like tie it around my waist. And on top of that, like everyone on set was super kind. Like the first AD knew what was happening. So if I ever like had to step off to grab a juice box, it wasn't like, what is he doing? And everyone was just super kind. It worked out amazingly.
That's so fantastic. And then lastly, I wanted to ask you a little bit about auditioning and self-taping, because that's the way that everyone is auditioning for projects right now. You know, obviously there's no in-person, and I was just interested in what you found works really well for you as you're kind of going through that process, and also just figuring out which version are you going to submit, because I imagine, you know, there's so many different ones that you can choose from, and you're obviously emotionally invested. So that must be a really difficult decision as well.
Yeah, it's tough because there are ups and downs of the self-taping. Like when I was younger, I used to like going into the room more. I'm sort of shifting now. I really enjoy the self-tapes because now I can focus on really getting that perfect take. Because when you're going into the room, you have one shot. Sometimes you're a little nervous. Sometimes you flub a line. Sometimes you're going a little too fast. That's not a problem. And so sometimes I will spend 8-9 hours on doing a self-tape one day. That's nothing crazy. It's just I want to get it, you know, perfect. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So it's really nice for me to be able to spend that extra time on making sure every detail is exactly what I want it to be. And then it is a lot of time going over takes that I'm like, is it this one or is it this one? But I like the process.
I think that's amazing advice for people who are watching this through our SAG-AFTRA membership. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk about the show and all the different aspects of your career. Really appreciate it, and stay safe.
Thank you. You too.